Mary O'Brien was born on February 4th, 1932, to her parents Agnes and Joseph in Pontiac, Michigan. She had a brother Thomas who was 5 years older than her. They had a good relationship overall, but like normal siblings growing up, they would often fight, and he would sometimes tease her in cruel ways. Mary's father ran a wholesale store selling candy and tobacco as a way to support their family. Her mother also worked as a registered nurse, and she was called to work during World War II. Mary grew up in a religious household and would often attend church services every Sunday with her family. She attended Catholic school her entire life, and her aunt was a nun and her uncle was a priest. Both of them were on her father's side of the family. A recent study found that individuals with stronger spiritual or religious orientation were more likely to live longer. Religion has been an important part of Mary's life since she was a young child, as she grew up in a devoutly Catholic home. She is currently 83 years old and has surpassed the average life expectancy of a woman living in the United States. So, therefore, her life story supports the findings of the study.
Mary's first memory is when she was 4 years old and her grandfather came to visit her. He put her on his lap and called her Peaches because she was the only girl of all of the grandchildren. He brought her candy. According to Santrock, this would be an account of episodic memory, which is the retention of information about the whens and wheres of life's happenings. Some of her fondest memories of childhood were spending the summer at her grandparents' farm. She would fill a wagon with hay and climb up to the barn loft and jump off into the hay wagon. Many of her other relatives lived close by to her grandparents' farm, so she would spend time at different family members' houses.
Mary's grandmother had 16 children, but unfortunately 7 of them died from childhood diseases. Her grandparents would always give her eggs to take home to her parents, in exchange for goods that Mary would bring to the farm on her visits. She would bring them boxes full of items such as sugar, tobacco, candy, and hygiene products. When Mary's brother Thomas was in high school, he would go on dates to places such as the drive-in movie theater, and Mary had to be the chaperone in the back seat of the car. So one time when Mary's brother went on a date with the girl to the drive-in movie theater, he had kissed a girl, and Mary immediately went home to tell her mother. Mary attended a Catholic high school, and they attended Mass each day. Her school did not have uniforms because most of the people in her school came from factory worker families and were not able to afford the cost of buying a uniform. She decided to join the church choir when she was in high school. While in high school, the parish bought a house where you could dance as a group and enjoy soda pop. It was used for social events, but the chaperones often would not show up. During her senior year, she held an event at her aunt's house with her entire senior class. They had hot dogs, barbecued, played games, and went swimming. She graduated from high school in 1950 with 35 other people in her class.
Mary then went to Mercy College in Detroit, Michigan, where she studied nursing, but soon changed her major to social work. Her brother joined the Navy after graduating from college and was on the battleship Missouri as an accountant when it went to North Korea. When she graduated from college, she could not find a job because of the recession. She went around to different companies and factories asking for a job, but not one would offer her one. She wanted to work for her father at the store, but he said no, there were already too many women in the office.
After college, since Mary could not find a job, she decided to move out to California to live with her aunt, so she went out to Pasadena, California. Her aunt told her a local Catholic school was looking for a teacher, so they hired Mary with the understanding that she had to go back to school in order to get a provisional teaching certificate. As a result, Mary went to Pasadena Junior College to continue her education and to obtain the teaching certificate. Throughout her time as a teacher, she taught grades 2nd through 5th, and later on in her career, she started to teach junior high courses to students who had trouble passing regular biology or chemistry. She enjoyed teaching the program, and she had her students get involved in things like science fair projects. At the time, Mary then decided to move out of her aunt's house and into an apartment with a roommate. The two women decided to hold a cocktail party. Mary invited a friend and told him he could bring another friend along if he would like. However, the original friend she invited ended up going on a ski trip, so he sent his friend Donald instead. A blind man who lived a floor below Mary in the apartment building could hear all of the footsteps from the party's traffic, so he called the building manager, and as a result, Mary was kicked out of her apartment, so she had to move back in with her aunt. However, before Mary was kicked out, several days after the cocktail party, Donald came back because he said he had forgotten his favorite fountain pen at her house and he wanted to come back to get it. When Donald arrived to pick up his pen, Mary offered him some of the chili she had made for lunch, and Donald then asked her to a lunch date at Van de Kamp's.
Van de Kamp's became a popular restaurant for Donald and Mary, and they had what Mary called library dates, as Donald was also in school getting his degree in history. Mary had a special feeling about Donald, and he would come and walk around the school fence by the playground while Mary was out with the children during their recess just so he could come say hi to her. About a year later, Donald and Mary got married on September 30th, 1956, and Mary says this is the best day of her life. At the age of 24 and 22, the Catholic Church affiliated with the school that Mary taught at married them. The children of the school witnessed the wedding as it was held during Mass, and the next day they had a wedding breakfast. Shortly after, they got an apartment together, and Mary's parents gave them money as they did not have enough to have a wedding reception. Mary describes her husband as a very helpful person, and they did everything together. He was very confident and easy to get along with, and he knew how to present himself well. Mary had her first child, Kathleen, in March of 1960, followed by Mary Ellen in September of 1962 and her son Joseph in September of 1964. While her children were young, Mary occasionally worked as a substitute teacher and then went back to teaching full-time while her children were older and all in school.
In her early 40s, Mary became ill and had to have a hysterectomy. During this time, her husband Donald was also going back to school in order to get his master's degree from CSU Los Angeles. In Mary's 50s, she was becoming close to being an empty nester, as all of her children were moving out and going off to college. During this time, her husband began to teach history and English courses at a local middle school. When Mary was in her late 50s, she had a heart attack, but fortunately, she survived. Shortly after, her husband was then diagnosed with cancer. It started in his liver, and the treatments and medicines worked at first, but it then got aggressive and spread to his brain. According to Santrock, coronary heart disease is the leading cause of death in middle-aged adults in the United States. This includes things such as sudden cardiac arrest, poor blood flow, and clogged arteries. Mary was very lucky to have survived her heart attack, and now she can tell us her life story.
In her 50s, Mary decided to retire because the school she was working for closed down, and it was easier to retire than find a new job. It would have been difficult to find a new teaching job because they were starting to require master's degrees and she only had a bachelor's degree. After retiring, she did some volunteer work and would often travel to Colorado to help her daughter with her grandchildren. In her mid-50s, Mary became a grandparent for the first time when her daughter Kathleen had a daughter named Erin. 3 years later, Kathleen had a son named Jeremy. Jeremy is currently studying to get his PhD in math, and Erin recently got married in October of 2015. Mary's daughter, Mary Ellen, has a daughter named Ella, who is 10 years old. Her son Joseph has 4 children, Andrew, Adam, Aiden, and Alex, who range in age from 5 to 12 years old. In total, Mary has 7 grandchildren. Mary said the difference between having a child and a grandchild is that she was glad she wasn't going to be a mother again when she found out she was going to be a grandmother. She helped to babysit her grandchildren occasionally and would often spoil them.
As Mary and her husband entered late adulthood, her husband Donald sadly lost his battle with cancer. It was at that time that Mary decided to sell her home in Michigan and move to California to be closer to her daughter Kathleen. Mary now lives in an independent living facility called The Reserve in Thousand Oaks that's an independent living for senior citizens, which is also where her daughter Kathleen lives. In a typical day, she'll get up in the morning, have breakfast, and go to an exercise class to help with things such as improving her balance. She likes to stay active and do a variety of exercises, such as yoga, exercise and armband exercises, leg exercises as well. She then goes to lunch and she tries to socialize with different people and introduce herself. She also enjoys attending different social activities that are put on by her program manager. According to Sandrock, the activity theory states that the more active and involved older adults are, the more likely they are to be satisfied with their lives. Mary is physically active for her age, and she is also very sociable. She has also reported being very happy with her life. Mary would describe the world today as having a lot of wars. She said that she feels sorry for people in the Middle East during the migration, such as the Syrian refugees. She says we still have some of the same problems and issues that were going on when she was growing up, because there are still wars, dictatorships, and political issues. She also says that she believes there is a clash between the healthy and the poor.
One of the things Mary wishes she had done in her 20s was take more courses that could have made her a more well-rounded person. She wishes she had more life experiences such as traveling and community volunteer work. The advice she has for people in their 20s now is to go to college and get all the education you can, because society has put more pressure on people. Her life was different in her 30s than in her 20s, because in her 20s she was trying to get an education and work towards a profession, whereas in her 30s she was raising her children. The criteria that Mary says makes someone an adult is having a good job.
Mary's middle adulthood was different than her early adulthood years because her husband was going to school and her children were young, so finances were hard and it was a very stressful time. In her middle adulthood, she felt more financially secure. An event that had an impact on Mary's life was World War II. When World War II began, Mary was 8 years old, and she said she saw the effects of it in things such as the rationing of food, gasoline, and other products. She said it affected her because you had to invent your own play, and recreation was very different than it is nowadays. People would often do things such as go bowling, go to the movies, or to go to see the orchestra. This is an example of a normative graded influence because it was a biological and environmental influence that is associated with history, in this case the event being World War II.
Mary believes a midlife crisis is when people reach the age of 65 and still want to work, or they retire and don't know what to do so they go back to work. She says a midlife crisis is when you get to a certain age and your education has not kept up with the improvements in the world. Their families are grown and moved out, and their marital relationship is different from when they were young. Mary wishes she had had more opportunities to travel, but did not feel the need to go to Europe. Her and her husband did travel around the US a lot. Mary's accomplishment that she is the most proud of is that all of her children received a good education and have college degrees.